Mom, look. Alya pressed both hands against the glass of the toy store window. Look how beautiful she is. Behind the glass stood a doll wearing a pink dress with a small ribbon tied around her pale hair. Unlike the other toys around her, she looked almost disturbingly real. Her skin had a soft, natural texture. Her tiny hands looked like those of a real child, and her eyes seemed to be looking directly at Alya. Maybe next time, sweetheart, her mother said, gently running a hand through her daughter's hair. Will you buy her for my birthday? Her mother smiled. We'll see. Alya nodded, but she couldn't take her eyes off the doll. She had already made up her mind. That doll was going to be hers. Natalia was an ordinary mother. She stayed home most of the time, took care of her family, and rarely said no to her daughter. So the day before Alya's birthday, Natalia went back to the shopping center and bought the doll. She wrapped it carefully and hid it in the closet. The next morning, Alya screamed with happiness when she opened the present. From that day on, the doll went everywhere with her. Alya carried it around the house. She took it to the living room. She brought it to the kitchen. She even tried taking it to school until her mother finally convinced her to leave it at home. A few days later, Anton, Alya's father, noticed something strange. She hasn't touched any of her other toys, he said one evening. Natalia sat beside him on the couch. She'll get bored eventually. Anton looked toward their daughter's bedroom. Alya was sitting on the floor, talking quietly to the doll. Maybe, he hesitated. Have you ever noticed something weird about it? Natalia laughed. What do you mean? I don't know. Anton lowered his voice. Sometimes I get the feeling it's watching me. Natalia glanced at the doll. It was sitting perfectly still in Alya's arms. It's a doll, Anton. I know, but... Anton shrugged. Whenever Alya leaves it somewhere, I swear its eyes seem to follow me. Natalia smiled. You're imagining things. Maybe. Anton looked at the doll one more time. The strange thing was that he couldn't explain why it felt so real. The manufacturer had clearly gone to unusual lengths. The rubber skin had tiny imperfections. The fingers were soft and flexible. The arms and legs had the weight of a real child. It was almost too realistic. But there was something else Anton hadn't told his wife. Sometimes, when Alya was talking to the doll, he heard another voice. A very quiet voice. At first, he assumed Alya was simply pretending. But after listening more carefully, he noticed something disturbing. Sometimes Alya would stop speaking, and the other voice would continue. One evening, Anton finally mentioned it. Maybe we should buy her another doll, he said. For what? So she can play family. Natalia smiled. Maybe next time. She stood up and kissed him on the cheek. Dinner's almost ready. Go get Alya. The family sat together at the table. Alya kept the doll on her lap. During the conversation, Anton noticed something. The doll moved, barely. Its head shifted a few millimeters. He stared at it. Then its eyes slowly closed. Anton blinked. When he looked again, they were open. He said nothing. That night, Anton couldn't sleep. After lying awake for nearly an hour, he quietly got out of bed. He went into the kitchen and made himself some tea. The house was completely silent. He was thinking about work, the weekend, and whether they should take the family somewhere. Then he heard it. A tiny voice, coming from Alya's bedroom. Anton froze. A second voice answered. He couldn't make out the words. Then Alya laughed. Anton immediately put his cup down. He walked toward her bedroom. The door was slightly open. He looked inside. Alya was sleeping peacefully. The doll was pressed tightly against her chest. Anton smiled. Maybe she'd been dreaming. Maybe he'd imagined the voices. He stepped closer. Sweet dreams, sweetheart. Alya didn't move. Then, without opening her eyes, she whispered, Sweet dreams, Daddy. Anton smiled and left the room. He didn't notice the doll's eyes opening behind him. A few days later, Alya became sick. She had a fever and a terrible cough. The doctor told her to stay in bed. That afternoon, Natalia sat beside her daughter. I told you not to eat so much ice cream. But I love ice cream. Alya smiled weakly. Anton stood in the doorway watching them. Let her stay home for a few days, he said. She'll be fine. Alya smiled. See? Dad said I could. Natalia laughed. Fine, but you're staying in bed. She stood up. I'll lock the door so you don't get up and run around. Alia nodded. She hugged the doll tightly. Her parents left the room. Their footsteps slowly disappeared down the hallway. The moment they were gone, Alia stopped smiling. She looked at the doll. Can we start tonight? The doll didn't move. Alia waited. Then its head slowly tilted to one side. Once, twice. Its eyes blinked. Alia smiled. That was her answer. Yes. She got out of bed. First, she closed the curtains. Then she pulled several candles from her drawer. She found a box of matches. Finally, she took a piece of chalk from her desk. Alia sat on the floor and began drawing. A large circle, then another shape inside it. She placed 4 candles around the edges. One by one, she lit them. The room filled with flickering orange light. Alia placed the doll in the center. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the doll's rubber feet moved. One tiny step, then another. Alia watched with excitement. What are we going to play? The doll slowly raised its head. Its lips opened. First, no sound came out. Then a whisper escaped. Hide and seek. Alia smiled. That evening, Anton and Natalia came into Alia's room carrying snacks. Their daughter looked much better. Her fever was gone. Her cough had almost disappeared. You really stayed in bed all day? Natalia asked. Alia nodded. I played a little. She hugged the doll. Anton looked down. There were strange chalk marks all over the floor. What happened here? Alia looked embarrassed. I drew something. Natalia smiled. Don't worry. I'll clean it. The parents left the room, talking quietly. Alia waited until their voices disappeared. Then she looked at the doll. Her smile slowly returned. They didn't find out. She leaned closer. Right? The doll's face changed. For the first time, its expression looked afraid. His mouth opened, tried to speak. Only a weak, distorted groan came out. Alia started laughing. What? She picked up the doll. I told you they'd never know. The doll stared at her. Alia hugged it tighter. You were right, though. She glanced at the closed bedroom door. The game was much more fun than I expected. The doll's eyes moved toward the closet. Alia followed its gaze. For a moment, she didn't understand. Then she heard something, a soft scratching sound. From inside the closet, Alia smiled. Your turn. She slowly walked toward it. Behind the closet door, something scratched again. 3 times. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Alia reached for the handle, and behind her, the doll quietly whispered, Don't open it. Alia stopped. She turned around. The doll was smiling, but this time, the voice had come from inside the closet.